Okay. Well, good afternoon. I want to welcome Margy and Jack Flynn, and this is a great honor, and I'm just excited as you can be about having this opportunity to speak with Margy and Jack. So Margy and Jack, thank you very much for this conversation.
Well, we thank you, and it's a privilege to be here. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your work, your effort on behalf of America and its people, for people. And the people really need to wake up right now. They have to get out of their lethargic state, okay? They have to get out of me state and be concerned about what's happening in the nation, okay? So we're glad that we're doing this interview with you.
Very pleased to be here. And we hope that we're going to bring some nuggets of information, some thoughts and ideas that might stimulate a good response among the people.
Well, very, very good. Thank you both. So Jack and Margy have been working on behalf of the freedom of the people of this country, of this world, for many decades. And their awareness of this encroaching communist takeover came to them a long time ago, but people were not ready to hear this. And they began to see, and they'll tell you their story, how they came about understanding this issue, and why the current legal system does not work for you and me, and how we are able to express and support our freedoms and our rights, our birthrights, our inalienable rights, even in a court of law. So this will be a very empowering series of conversations with Jack and Margy, because not only are we going to take a look at what doesn't work in the current legal system of bar attorneys and judges and courts, but we are going to learn how to become empowered, how to become educated, and how to stand up for our basic rights to protect our life, liberty, and property under the Constitution of the United States of America. So now I would like, Margy, if you could maybe just give a little explanation of how you got into this, and then Jack, I'll ask you the same thing.
Sure, I would be glad to. I started, well, I had an interest in government and politics really ever since I was a little girl, because both of my parents were very interested in government and politics. And I was an only child, so I was with adults a lot of the time. And inevitably, there would be the discussions about what was going on in Washington or at the State House in Massachusetts. And I asked a lot of questions. And I was able to glean a lot of inferences that there was a lot that was wrong with the system. And my father was a very big fan of the revolution, of the Constitution, of the rights of the people, of the fact that America was egalitarian and provided opportunity for all. Every April 19th, he took me to Lexington and Concord to watch the reenactment of the battle, the slaughter around the world. We'd go to Boston, we'd go up to Bunker Hill in Charlestown, we'd go to Paul Revere's church, we'd walk the Freedom Trail, because he'd always say to me, never take your freedom for granted, always respect that freedom and never give it up. So as I got into school, high school and whatever, I had a very wonderful education because we had really good teachers then. And these teachers were committed. And my civics teacher was absolutely fanatical about how things were supposed to work constitutionally. And he kind of drilled that into a lot of us. Some of us got it and some didn't. But it gave me, I would say, the structural foundation, the nuts and bolts of how government works. We're the government, okay? The people are the government. We delegated some of our authority to the people who run the machinery of government, whether they're elected or appointed. And it was our job as a people in a self-governing nation to oversee them and make sure that they do their jobs pursuant to the oaths that they take before they can assume an office and execute any duties. And that oath is super important because it binds any public official to the Constitution. And that's a big point, which we'll come back and forth on because this is something that we all need to know. So fast forward to a freshman in high school. I was 14 years old, and I'm on the sidelines watching a football game between my town and our rival town. And it was a very crowded day. So we were standing behind the sidelines. And there was a police officer there who I knew because his son was a couple of grades behind me in school. And he was yelling at the kids to stay back, stay back. And we did. We didn't cross the line. We were, in those days, kids were pretty respectful, you know. So he came over to me for some reason and he told me to get back behind the line. And I said, I am behind the line. You can see the line. There's a white chalk line there. And he said, don't sass me or don't give me any lip or whatever. And I said, I didn't give you any lip. And he shoved me back. He said, get back. And he shoved me. And I almost fell. And if there hadn't been a crowd of people behind me, I would have fallen to the ground. Well, I was furious. I do have a temper. I'm an Aries. And occasionally it rears its ugly head. So I just said to him, how dare you touch me? I said, get your hands off me. Don't you ever put your hands on me. I said, you just violated my constitutional rights. And the guy looked at me like, I said, you can't do that to me. You swore an oath. And he's looking at me like, uh-oh, this kid's going to be trouble. And he said, you better stop your lip right now or I'm going to let your parents know. I said, don't bother. I'll let them know as soon as I get home. So I did. And my father was really enraged. He said, you and I are going to take a little ride. My mother was preparing food. He said, we'll be back in about an hour. We took off, went to the police station. My father walked in. He said, I'd like to speak to the chief. And he said, well, the chief's in his office. He's on the phone. He said, I'll wait. You tell him I'm here. And we were there maybe 10, 15 minutes. The chief came out. You could see by the look on my father's face, he was furious. So he took us back into the room. He said, what's going on? My father said, tell the chief what happened. So I did. And the chief was like, I'm very sorry. There's no excuse for that. I'm going to speak to the officer and I'm going to have him apologize and whatever. My father said, that's all well and good. But you better tell him that he has a duty to uphold his oath. And what he did didn't uphold his oath.
And I didn't get the last words of that.
What he did not uphold his oath. He broke his oath when he pushed my daughter and violated her rights. So he needs to apologize for that. And then we'll consider what, if any, steps we're going to take next. He just wanted to scare them. Okay.
Wow. What a great example your father gave you.
Yes, and he stood up for me instead of saying, well, you must have done something wrong. He knew I was telling the truth. And he was an avid believer in standing up for your rights. So a few days later, I get a phone call to come to the police station, and the police officer apologized to me in person in front of the chief because the chief didn't want to get sued, obviously. So that was the end of that. But it was my opportunity to realize that you can stand up for your rights. And if you don't, you won't have any rights. That was
at the age of 14.
I was 14, yeah.
Wow, Margy. I mean, that set you on a course for your whole rest of your life.
It absolutely did. And it stayed with me because I was always the one that spoke up in class if something wasn't right. And the kids would come and say, you ask Mrs. So-and-so, because she'll listen to you. Because I had credibility, because I was blessed with intelligence, but I was also blessed with curiosity and I was blessed with compassion. So the combination worked well in terms of communication. And I was able to articulate my ideas and I got results from my ideas. So it made me a natural leader in that respect. And not to be arrogant about it, I tried to use that ability to lead to bring people to the right side, not the wrong side. And I did it all through my life. It's been the same thing since I was 14.
Wow, very, very fine. And we are all, including myself, the recipients of your leadership that went all the way back to your early teen age, which was a lesson that that we're all benefiting from. So thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
Very, very fine. Jack, could you talk about your beginnings and bring us to that nugget of that conflict, of that experience, like Margy's, that brought you to your your lifelong pursuit of truth and freedom?
Well, I'll tell you, that started right at the very beginning. Because when the doctor pulled me out of my mother's womb and I said, oh God, no, not this place again. I do not want to be here again. I want
I'm
nothing to
with
do
you.
with this earth. Anyway, I grew up during the Second World War. Okay. So I could see what was going on. Now I come from a combination Irish and Yankee family in Boston. Okay.
Irish and what? Irish and what?
English.
Irish and Yankee, which is English. Okay. And they're both political families. They're old line political families that go way back. To give you an example, one of my ancestors was John Adams, the second president. So both on the Irish side and the Yankee side, we've been here in America for a very, very long time. So I was kind of brought up in that respect for the nation and the founding of the nation. But then as a little kid, viewing what's going on in the Second World War, and listening to the radio, the shortwave radio, and hearing London bombed and Berlin bombed and other places bombed and all the nonsense that was going on, I said that we are insane. We don't make any sense, okay? There's something missing in mankind. We're not really humans. Humans were the first species. We're the second species. We're mankind. So we're a little different from humans. Humans had intelligence, they had breeding, they had awareness, they had consciousness. Mankind doesn't have that. And if mankind did have that, we wouldn't have these problems that we have. So as a little kid, I saw guys coming home from the war. This is during the war years, 41, 42, 43. I saw guys coming home, no legs, no arms, no eyes, okay? Half of their shoulders blown off, all right? They couldn't even talk. They were so utterly frustrated with what happened, okay? They were in fear most of the time. This is insanity. And these are all Christian nations fighting each other. Well, you have Christian nations, they're not only fighting each other on land, okay? They're fighting each other under the sea. They're fighting each other on top of the sea. And then they're fighting each other in the air. It made no sense. So I said, no matter how the family looks at things, I look at it very differently. So I started probably around 4 or 5 years of age, saying there's something awfully wrong with this situation and there's something awfully wrong with mankind.
Wow,
Now-
that's young. I mean, I was impressed with 14.
Well, again, when you see it, hearing about it is one thing, but when you actually see it, when you witness it, it's something totally different. And I did witness it, okay? Now, as we went along at the end of the Second World War, we had a thing called communism, okay?
Communism?
Communism, yeah. We
Yes.
had a thing, I call it a thing because it's absolutely evil. The most
Yes.
evil thing on the planet, but the most powerful thing on this planet is communism. And it
And
has
it's my,
been,
I'm going to interrupt for a second. It's my understanding that the accountants
Yes,
were the creators of Marxism and communism.
absolutely.
yeah, of
Yes,
course.
absolutely.
of
It's their
course.
tool. It's their tool on the ground, so they don't get their hands dirty.
That's a really good way of putting that, their tool on the ground.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you
they're
for
both-
that, Margie.
They're boots on the ground, carrying out all the dirty work, okay? When the money just pours in. So communism was able to do anything it wanted, to buy anything it wanted. And after the Second World War, or actually before the war ended, there were conferences, the Cairo Conference, the Toronto Conference, other conferences, Yalta, what have you, between the communist president of the United States named Roosevelt and between the communist butcher of Russia called Stalin and the communist fool from England called Churchill, okay? All three communists meeting in all of these nations, and all of these communists decide that they're going to give Middle Europe to Russia and communism. I said, there's something awfully wrong with this. The American president is doing this and the American people don't say boo. The English people don't say boo. We're giving 500 million people or more into communism in 20 or 30 countries in a communism, and we don't do a damn thing about it. There's something awfully wrong with that.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second just to clarify. And were Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill all accountants?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
yeah. They were definitely of that ilk, okay? Definitely. So after the Second World War, we have something called Korea. So we go and send our people to Korea. What do? We create another state called North Korea. The United States did that, okay? Then we go to Vietnam and we create another state called Vietnam,
South Korea.
okay? Vietnam, all communist, another communist state, okay? We created one in Cuba. We created one in Venezuela. We just created one in Afghanistan. This country is the most communist country on the face of the earth. It's the most successful communist country on the face of the earth. And the American people have no idea whatsoever.
Okay, so Jack and Margy, I have to interrupt you on this. How is it possible that we have been absolutely, not all of us, obviously you weren't, the two of you, but
A little bit.
okay, for a while maybe.
A
How
minute.
is it that the wool was pulled over our eyes? Is it just that simple to say we are a democratic nation and we stand for freedom, and yet we do just the opposite along with Eisenhower?
Well, I'll give you my hit on it, my theory, okay, and this is mine. I'll take my own personal responsibility. It's opinion based on a lot of observation and some facts too. But in my opinion, this country, the people of this country have been under a spell for a very long time. And the spell has been induced by propaganda, programming, conditioning, okay? Infiltration into the system of academia from
Yes.
preschool right up through graduate work and beyond. All of those things have combined to give a sense of authority and credibility to the things that happen in everyday life, which if they were examined objectively without that filter, people would say, this doesn't make any sense, this isn't right. But because they say it's okay, then it must be okay. And I must be wrong to think this way. And no one wants to be wrong. Everyone wants to be right and everyone wants to be cool. So they just go along to get along. I mean, look what happened when political correctness began to rear its ugly head, okay? In this country years ago, the average American thought that America was the greatest communist fighter in the world. We were anti-communist. We go and we protect other countries. Bunk. We go into other countries so we can devastate them, and then our corporations can plunder all of their resources, make lots of profits, and if people get killed and displaced in the process, yeah, no big deal, just collateral damage. That's how they look at it, because we're nothing but commodities to them, and we are dispensable. They couldn't care less what happens to us.
And is that probably one of the most egregious aspects of communism, is that life becomes a commodity, that
Yes.
we are as commoditized as wheat and sugar and
Anything, yes. Coffee, tea, it doesn't matter. They don't, what they do is they depersonalize, and they're very good at divide and conquer. They create problems where no problems existed so that they can further divide, because the more divisions there are amongst any society, the less likely that society is going to join together, awake
Yes.
to what's going on at the top, who's pulling the strings, and then take some lawful action to stop it. So they keep everybody fighting over ridiculous issues that they make up as they go along. It's a master plan. They do it everywhere.
Well, very, very interesting. So Jack, you're talking about communism is evil and the infiltration. What was the actual inception, that the year when Marxism and communism were birthed? I mean, when did that actually happen? Because we've seen atrocities for thousands of years by the accountants.
Communism has been with us almost from the very beginning in one name or another, okay? And the same people who are the controllers of communism are the same people today, all right? The ones we referred to earlier. And the communists have their boots on the ground. Now, my explanation as to why people have not seen what's directly in front of their faces is because mankind is essentially insane. And I'm serious, I'm not joking. I'm serious.
But,
Saying,
but Jack, are you, I mean, I don't feel insane. And I know the two of you are not. That I know, you're authentic, as am I. And those who understand what is happening all seem to have a common thread of authenticity.
Yes.
And that, from my observation, is the beauty of what brings us together. But are you saying that the insanity is coming from those that are perpetrating the Marxist
no, the insanity,
communism?
no, the insanity comes from the people because the people accept it, okay? The people have very little discernment value whatsoever. They have very little consciousness, if any consciousness at all. Now, when I talk about the people, I'm talking about societies of people, the American society, the Russian society, the Chinese society. Within those societies, obviously, there are individuals who do not fit that description. There are groups of people who do not fit that description. But these individuals in these groups are so far and few between that they don't even show up in any measurement scale, because the vast majority of the people are truly insane. They do not think of anything that goes beyond themselves. They're mostly concerned about their own issues, their own positions, their own jobs, their own, let's say, walks in life, their own values. They're not concerned about their brother at all. They're concerned about themselves. Now, there are exceptions to this, but I'm talking on a societal basis. They don't give a damn. They don't care, okay?
So
If it's
I'm
not-
going to interrupt you one more time. So would you say that perhaps this is the 80-20 principle that applies here, that the majority of the population lead unexamined lives, are
Yes.
not conscious, are not discerning, as you say, and are just meandering through life without perhaps even any real passions or understanding their purpose? I mean, I don't mean to be discounting, but to say, to live a really full life, we must understand our reasons, our raison d'etre. We must understand that we have a purpose, and it's our responsibility to cultivate an ethics and a work ethic, morality, to have passions, to contribute to society, and
Yes.
and that this 80-20 principle, unfortunately, leaves the masses outside of that description. Would you speak
Yeah,
to that?
I think that's a good approximation of it. And the numbers slide because we really don't have 20% of this country to say that's conscious. We don't. Let's
Not
be
at all.
honest. We're lucky
Not
if
at
we have
all.
1%, maybe.
Yeah.
Probably approaching that now. Not to be disparaging of the people, but we have to call it as we see it. And when Jack speaks of insanity, I know that's a harsh word, but think about it. Given the fact that, to me, a sane person understands his or her relationship with the greater world, okay? He understands that he's an individual, but he also understands that he's part of a whole, part of a community, larger or smaller. The people that are walking the streets today, many of them do not have the ability to make that association. They don't think about anything but their own very basic needs, like the limbic brain, okay? They're not going into the higher realms of consciousness. So they don't expand, and they don't have the wisdom to see that it all fits together. So they'll file their own nest instead of saying, well, I don't want to do that because I live here too, and I don't want Bob up the street to have to deal with my mess. It goes to every aspect of life that we have sullied, okay? And as a species, we have sullied a lot of things in ignorance, some of it in just selfishness and greed, a lot of it just because we didn't think anybody was watching, okay? And you can tell how a person really is by what they do when they don't think anybody is watching them right? Whether or not they have that core. And it goes way beyond morality. It goes to integrity and ethics, which is something that has almost disappeared from the mass of society. When you look at how people act today, what their focus is on, and the artificial things that they can look at as a holy grail to hold on to, and they miss the real stuff because, well, it isn't in that little box that they've been told fits their progressive liberal point of view. That's how you have to think, right? They don't.
When you say that, it brings up, have you heard of the myth of Gyges?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
I haven't.
Well, I'm just going to mention it here now. I was listening to a philosophy professor about 2.5 decades ago on a tape, and he told this myth, and it was a Greek myth, and there was a shepherd who was up in the mountains with his sheep, and there was an earthquake, and he looked up, and his flock just dispersed, and he saw this cave, and he ran into the cave, and it was dark inside, and he was, waiting for the rumbles to quieten, and he was looking around, and he saw this glint on the floor, and he bent down and he picked this thing up, and it was a ring. So he put it on his finger, and you know how you put a new ring on your finger and it's a little uncomfortable, and he was messing with it, and he turned the top and he went invisible.
Mm.
And then he turned it back and he became visible. So that night, he went to the king's palace and he raped the queen and killed the king. And he went into the king's coffers, and he's invisible, and he takes all the jewels and all the gold and everything of precious value from these coffers, and he hikes it up into the cave in the mountains. And when he's finished, he turns it back. So what Socrates discussed and questioned for ever long was, if you can do the invisible crime, will you? And I thought about that ever since. And I've looked at this line that seems to bifurcate societies.
Mhm.
There are those that are moral and live with integrity and responsibility. And along with that goes that discernment and what you were talking about, both of you. And then on the other side, it's what can we get away with? How can we create whatever we want and whatever we need without accountability and without responsibility?
And that's the kind of culture that we have really taken hold in this country. And not just here, it's all over the world. Because there's been a movement, and the part of it goes to the underlying communism, okay? It goes to that movement to destroy the soul of mankind and make sure that those that are part of the original early humanity don't get a chance to influence and positively direct those in the lower echelon of mankind. That's how I've seen it for a very, very long time. And when the communists first came here, it was around the time of the War of Northern Aggression. Before that happened, because Marx and Engels did their lovely treatises, and people came to this country, many of them were accountants, and they had that communist mentality, and they had this desire to infiltrate themselves and insinuate themselves into virtually every aspect of life in this country of any importance.
Can you put a date to that of what you're referring?
It started in the late 1840s and the 1850s.
Yeah, around there.
And it picked up in vast numbers just before the War of Northern Aggression. And that war was their first victory in America.
Yes.
Actually, it wasn't. It was their second victory in America.
What was the war? I'm sorry, the war of what?
Northern Aggression.
Some people
Northern
call it
aggression.
the Civil War, but we
No.
don't use that term because there was nothing civil about it.
That
Okay,
was
so-
their second victory. Their first victory was a lot earlier. It was called the Revolution. And the second victory was the Act of 1812, which the fraudulent, treasonous 41st Congress
It was
passed.
1871.
Excuse me, 1871, which that Congress passed and changed the status of the American citizen into a US citizen, changed the country from a constitutional republic to the US America, okay, US of A, all right, or US government, if you will, and changed the status of everything you can think of, all right? It went
No,
against,
I want to interrupt you for a second. How in the world could something like that happen? I mean,
because the people are not looking. They don't look, all right? Let me give you an example. The first real communist victory in America was the Revolutionary War, all right? Was the Revolutionary War fought for the benefit of the people, or was the Revolutionary War fought for the benefit of communism? You can answer that question by looking at who controls the world right now. If the Revolutionary War were truly fought for the benefit of the people, we would be living in the egalitarian society that was set forth by that Constitution, but we're not. We're living in basically a hellhole, okay? If you
so
look at
you're
America
saying
today,
you're saying that the victory of the Revolutionary War essentially put into place and established the foundation of a communist
yes, that's correct.
ground for this
Oh, no,
country.
yes, let me follow up. You say what you want in a minute. Let me follow up. If you follow the policies of the first administration, okay, and the first administration should have been an Adams administration, not a Washington administration. You'll never see this in the history books, but on the first electoral college vote, Adams won, not Washington. So there was a second vote, and Washington was a Kingsman and the original traitor to this country, along with Hamilton and John Jay and others. Okay, they were all Kingsmen. They supported the crown, pretending to support America. Okay, and that trio and other Kingsmen founded the first central bank in this country, first private central bank in this country, foreign owned. And we've had a central bank ever since in this country, ever since. No matter what the government says otherwise, there has always been a central bank in this country.
And
That is-
and the central bank is controlled by the
By the
accountants.
accountants.
Yes, of
Correct.
course.
This is what we're
course.
trying to say. If you look at it on the face of it, oh, it was a great victory, the ragtag patriots win, blah, blah, blah. And they did in the trenches. They
Yes,
fought
they
it. Those
did.
who did, they lived it, they breathed it, they died for it, they sacrificed everything. It was real to them. They didn't know that it was part of a ruse to create a country that would be an experiment in self-governance, okay? Which would make the people work harder and longer and deeper and faster and more cleverly to have this illusion of freedom, so that the accountants and their minions could reap the benefits by taxing them to death and manipulating their best instincts and interests against them. And that's what they have done forever, okay? And you can call it anything you want. It's the same thing. It's evil.
So yes, I'm with you there, but how in the world has, I mean, we're talking about a lot of very intelligent people. Even the intelligent people who were there at the moment when Adams was running for president and lost. But
Right.
how in the world has this grown and built and gotten to a point, even at the moment of the inception of this country? How is it that the evil has had its grips like iron and
because
has
it's
managed to manipulate so effectively?
The word is manipulate. They are very, very clever, and they're smart enough to ingratiate themselves. Okay, they never do it initially with the guns and the rocks and the sticks and the stones. They start out very slowly and gradually. They insinuate themselves by being clever, by being almost obsequious, until they have the trust of the people. And they start shifting gears, they start developing policies and ideologies. And it's always for the betterment of the people, right? But it never really is. And because the people don't have the confidence in themselves, they don't do their own due diligence, they accept these things from these authorities and experts at face value. It isn't until they get hit in the head with the 2x4 that they realize, oops, I think I miscalculated, something's wrong. And by that time, it's so entrenched that it looks to be impossible to stop, which is precisely what they want us to believe, that we cannot do anything about it. And I don't believe that for a second. I think we're all here at this time doing the work we're doing at this time to stop this insidious insanity, because it goes all the way back to the first rebel, so to speak. And I'm sure if you've read John Lashland and other people, you know what he's talking about and the group that came about. And there is an insanity in that group.
Yes,
There's
they're demented.
Yes, they're demented, they're psychopaths, they're what we would call sociopaths, and they're totally ruthless and evil. They're the most selfish and greedy and just vicious. And that is the mentality that has basically developed our world.
So Jack, would you think that perhaps when in referring to the society of people as insane, could we maybe even postulate that perhaps they're more trusting and loving and incapable of comprehending the psychopathic mind and the evil nature that and maybe just living lives and then also the mind control, the propaganda has eased in and through that trust has twisted and taken advantage of people and that perhaps the 80-20 principle shows that as these loving men and women that we actually are that we actually are capable of being manipulated terribly and twisted by twisted minds and twisted actions.
First of all, I don't go along with the 80-20 principle.
Okay.
I'm a pragmatic realist. Everything I do is based upon existing realities, okay? Fact, law, valid evidence, and truth. Okay, that's where Margie and I come from. So we're really way off the scale when it comes to other people and how they look at things, because we have a totally, at least me, I have a totally different viewpoint. Margie is a little more genteel than me. I'm not. I go right for it. I would say.
Would that be a difference between a man and a woman?
Yeah,
not
that has
necessarily.
a lot
No,
to do with it. Yeah, it
because
does.
there are women who think like I do, and I
Yeah.
know them.
Okay.
I know them. So I would
they're
say,
bitches.
to be generous, it's 99 to 1.
Didn't I just say that earlier?
99 to 1. And that's being generous. Okay. Now, what you described, okay, are all valued positions that should be lived by society. They're all valued positions. However, those people in those positions do not recognize the hard existing realities present in their world. They don't see those, okay? And if someone doesn't see the existence and understand the reality in which he lives, then he's insane. He's not dealing with the same position. He's dealing with something that's way outside of reality. So that to me is insanity. Now, how did we get insane? Well, we got insane from that fellow, okay, and that tribe that Margie was talking about earlier, okay, one that John Lash speaks about. He inculcated mankind, all right? He designed mankind the way he wanted to design mankind. And he designed mankind to be stupid with enough slight degree of intelligence to be workful and useful in the workplace, but that was it. You can't challenge me. You can't object to what I'm doing. You accept your lot in your life and you keep your mouth shut. And that's how society has been bred for how many thousands of years? That's the way it is,
And what's
okay?
the driving force behind that whole ideation is the God hook. I'm a God and I know better than you do. And that's worked masterfully in virtually every culture and society on the planet. And all of those early religions, if you want to call them that, were basically orchestrated by the same being with enough differences to make sure they kept fighting.
Right, the Abramic
Yes, you know,
religion.
there was a
Yes.
bifurcation here, and it goes on and on and on. And there's so many commonalities in all of the ancient religions and their ideations and their practices and their They're mythical figures that you can tell that was the hand of the same entity, and the hand's a little bit demented, okay? So when you look at that as the, say, the foundation of creating societies, I'll make that plural. And then you look at the way the life that people live in this society are so filled with tasks and things and worries and concerns and to-do lists, and all of the other things that people deal with every day. They don't have a lot of time left to have the luxury of thinking critically about much of anything, which makes
They're driven by fear.
exactly
Yes.
fear and desperation, survival.
Yeah.
So if you're driven by that and you've been given a false set of values that you think are yours and you hold on to tenaciously, but it really came from somebody else who deliberately misled you so you would feel disempowered all of your life and continue to strive to be better, and you never will be because you're held back by those ideations, then you have a perfect scenario to pull a wool over everybody's eyes, and they'll say, thank you for doing this to me. And this is what we have on planet Earth. It's crazy, but this is where we are.
Well, and when we are driven by fear, there's no place for creativity. There's no place for love. There's no place for finding solutions, because one's behind an 8-ball and continuing to fall backwards.
Absolutely.
So stepping out. So Jack, can you continue with how, at what point then did you really take forward your actions of being a spokesperson and standing up for rights, because understanding communism was fundamental to all of that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And understanding that the people are not doing what people should do in the normal sense of, let's say, humanism. All right. We don't go to world war to create a communist world for the benefit of those who control communism. We don't do that, but that's what we did. Okay. Now let's go back to the First World War. The First World War was the great war to end all wars. What a crock of crap that was, okay? A total crock of crap. The people don't really know the reasons for war, and very few people ask the reasons. In other words, the figure who has the authority, theoretically, he doesn't have the authority, but they perceive that the figure has the authority, tells them, we want you. I'm Uncle Sam. I want you. I want you to go over and fight those dirty Huns. I want you to kill those dirty Huns. Well, those dirty Huns have been our allies for a very long time. England has been our enemy for a very long time, but the people never figured that out. Like the people never figure out much of anything. Okay.
But Jack, so how was England the enemy of the United States? Are you saying because we fought a war against them, and that?
Yes.
And so how did that mythology shift? Because yes, we all know about that war and the heavy taxation wars. So talk just a little bit. How did that get annihilated in terms of our minds?
The American people don't really use their minds, unfortunately, which is why these problems happen. If the people really truly use their minds, we'd be living in a paradise. They don't. So we don't live in that paradise, okay? It goes back to the position we were talking earlier. That fellow or that entity that established mankind, he built mankind in a certain way. Mankind follows the ruler, follows the herd follows the ruler, and the herd goes right over the cliff, okay? That's the way it is.
Led by the demented deity.
Yes, there you go.
So let's go back to the First World War. The First World War was really fought for two reasons, okay? Two reasons. Number one, they wanted to establish communism in Russia and Germany. That was the purpose of the First World War. You can't find 1,000 people in America who know that. They have no idea whatsoever, zero, okay? if you can find 1,000, that's very generous, all right? The second reason was that England had controlled the seas forever. Well, what was Germany doing? Germany was challenging England under the Kaisers, okay? Wilhelm I, Wilhelm II. They were challenging England for that trade. England was the largest colonial nation on the face of the earth. The Germans were challenging England on that trade. So we couldn't let the communist country of England be defeated by the capitalist country of Germany. So that was the second reason, all right? So after the First World War, what happened? Well, I'm not finished. But let me take you after, and then I'll come back a little bit. After the First World War, we had a solid state of communism in Russia, and we had a burgeoning state of communism in Germany, okay? People don't know this. They don't realize this. They have no idea. But communism was very prevalent in Germany after the First World War. And the communists came in and devastated Germany after the defeat, okay, and took over the whole nation. There was one guy who stopped that. We'll get into that later on. Now, let's go back to the reason why America entered the war. Woodrow Wilson, another
A
communist,
traitor.
a communist, who admitted on his deathbed that he sold out his own country. It took him till he was dying to admit that he sold out his own country. And I'm sad to say he was a relative in the family, okay? That we disown him, we have nothing to do with that man. He was a total traitor, okay? Wilson told the American people that America will never enter that war. He lied. He lied through his teeth, okay? If you go back to what the planners decided, because the First World War was planned a long time before the Archduke ever got assassinated, back 20, 25 years before that, okay? All these things were set in motion for many, many years. Excuse me. Germany was a very strong nation, okay?
Yes.
German people are very independent people. I happen to like the German people very much. I lived in Germany when I was a kid, okay? And I took Margie to Germany after we met. And she thought, oh, I don't want to go to Germany. I don't like the German people.
No, I was neutral, but I wasn't looking forward.
She loved it.
I loved the
She
people.
loved the people.
Wonderful people.
She loved the people. She loved Germany. It's a very picturesque nation, okay? Right now, because of communism, it's having massive problems everywhere, okay? I wouldn't go to
It
Germany
has a
now.
communist prime minister.
You mean
Yeah.
Angela? Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
More than that.
Yes,
Yeah,
an
yeah,
accountant.
yeah,
Much more than
big time,
that.
big time.
All right. So Germany won every major battle in that war, okay? Every battle on land, every battle on the sea, under the sea, in the air. They won everything. They were very strong. They defeated England. So in 1960, and everyone else who participated against them. But England was the main foe, okay? So in 1916, England was on its deathbed, ready to die. Now the Germans are strong people, but they're also passionate people. They're also compassionate people. They did not want to devastate the English people in England, okay, and the others that they were opposing. So what they did was this. They said, look, we know you're defeated. We don't want to kill you. We don't want to exterminate you. We want you to live with us as our allies and training partners. We want to go back to the way it was 30 years ago before this ever started. And we offer you a peace with no reparations, no damages, no payments, nothing, zero. This is the first time in the history of existence that a dominant power ever offered a defeated power
Wow.
peace on those terms. No reparations, no damages. We go back to where it was. Well, guess what happened? Some vested interest went to the powers in England and said, look, don't accept the German peace agreement. Don't accept it, okay? if you do what we want you to do and you back our position, we will bring America into the war. You've heard of the Balfour Agreement? There you go, right there. Okay, that's what happened. All right. Now, isn't it interesting that Lenin took over in 1917 and America entered the war in 1917? That wasn't a coincidence at all. Okay, no coincidence there at all. So America came in and Germany was defeated because America had massive amounts of armaments that they supplied to all their allies to devastate Germany, and that's exactly what happened.
So the
strongest-
funding behind that
Yes,
was what defeated the war, and the British were funded by the accountants.
yes, yes, and the Americans as well.
Yeah.
And the
It
Americans. as
was
well.
a one big happy accountant-fed family, you know.
So
So-
it was to perpetuate the movement of communism through
Mhm.
Russia and Germany.
In Germany as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. That was the First World War. Okay. Now, years ago, when I was in college in Boston, I went to a lot of different schools. I went to Harvard, Boston University, and some other schools. And at Harvard, there was a professor who came in every once in a while. And he was a traveling professor. He would go from university to university. And this guy was named Alexander Kerensky, who was the first president or prime minister, some call him prime minister, of Russia during the revolution.
Oh, wow.
He would openly state in these lectures and seminars and what have you, classes, he would acknowledge the fact that the United States government supplied massive amounts of money, gold, food, armaments of all types, tanks, planes, guns, cannons, you name it, and American fighting forces to Lenin to help the Bolsheviks defeat the whites. And he was very proud of that. He said, if the United States government did not do that, there would be no communist Russia today. So I go back to my original statement that this is the largest, most successful communist nation on the face of the earth.
Did
It
you
has
say
been
to
from the
defeat
beginning.
the whites?
Yeah,
Yes.
the whites, the non-communists.
The non-communists. You had the Reds, you had the Reds, the Bolsheviks, and the whites, the non-communists who supported the Tsar. Okay. So we go way back with communism in this country. Way, way, way back. Now you go to the Second World War, and I brought this up earlier. What was the purpose of the Second World War? Well, a guy named Hitler came along, and he was the man that all the accountants and everyone loved, okay, all the financiers or what have you. He was their man. He was going to do this. He was going to do that, okay? But they didn't realize that he was a total anti-communist. He hated communism with a passion. But he feigned an alliance with Russia, all right? But when it came close to war, he broke that alliance. And that was the end of Hitler, and that was the end of Germany, okay? Hitler built the strongest economy this world has ever seen and
Yeah.
basically bypassed the banks. Because he helped the people, he helped the German people. Whether you hate this guy or love this guy, you have to look at the facts, and we look at the facts. He helped the German people. But when he openly turned against communism, that was the end of him, his country, and his nation, all right?
But
At the end,
But didn't he also, I mean, in refusing to participate in the central banking system,
Yes,
basically set his own grave in motion because
Yes.
yes,
yes, absolutely, because those two things are connected. The communism and the central banks are connected. So when he went against both of those things, it was
his
it was
doom.
over and done. He was finished. Now he's all of a sudden he's a bad guy, just like Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Americans gave him money, weapons, power, praise, whatever. As soon as he decided he was going to go another way and walk away from our alliances and our money system, now he's an evil man. We had to destroy it.
And it was the same thing with Noriega in
Yes.
Panama
Oh,
and
yeah.
so many others over the years, okay?
Litany.
You can't believe anything this government tells you, nothing. If you believe the exact opposite, then you're much closer to the truth. So getting back to the Second World War, at the end of the war, as I say, by plans amongst these three communists, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, over 500 million people were given into communism. So the United States of America is the greatest communist supporter and founder in existence. Okay? If you go back to China, all right, we haven't touched upon China yet.
Another one, yeah.
There was a guy in China named Iron Back Joe Stitwell.
I don't know
Was
that.
it? Well, very few people know him. He was a general, okay? He was a communist, and he was an appointee of Roosevelt in China, okay? His job was to theoretically support Chiang Kai-shek. Now, Chiang Kai-shek was no saint, okay, by any stretch of the imagination, but he was not pro-communist. He was not a pro-communist at all. He was a communist fighter. All right, so all of the funding that came for America that went through Joe Stitwell, that was supposed to have gone to Shek, went to Mao Zedong and Chou Enlai for their communist revolution. We directly created Chinese communism. And then what did the great communist fighter Nixon do? All of a sudden, he's touching glasses and toasting the great communists in Russia and China. He's full of crap. Like all of our politicians, they're full of crap. And one thing I must mention here, the people must understand that in communist nations, it's fascism and capitalism for the rulers and communism for the people, okay? And the people have no rights, no say, no concern, nothing. We have various students of ours, and Margie might have mentioned this before, various students of ours in different states teaching our methods to people in those states. And most of those leaders are escapees from communist nations. And the gal in California who's heading up the movement there, they're operating in every county in California, like Oklahoma, is an escapee from Czechoslovakia, okay? And she's had over 30,000 affidavits sent by Californians to government offices, holding office, meaning the domestic enemy communists ruling California. And that's shaken up a lot of those SOBs, a lot. There have been firings, resignations, recalls.
Very fine.
I'm sorry?
Very fine. It's like what you said, you know, or what we know. Margaret Mead said it takes just one.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's a good person to quote anymore.
Well, I have my questions about her too, but I do like some of the things that she said, you know.
Yes.
Small group of committed people, you know, can change the world. Never forget that.
Well, I was born and raised in Canada, and under that socialist country, I mean, today we look at the tremendous communist flood there and what is happening. And I have family there who continue to report to me about what is taking place. And you know, if we look at the connections of Justin Trudeau and who he actually resembles.
Fidel Castro.
Yes, and his mother was well known to have spent much time with Fidel Castro along with Pierre Trudeau, but he looks not at all like his father.
Nothing like Pierre, I know.
No.
Strikingly different.
Yes. So very, very, very interesting. So how is it though that the victors can write history the opposite of what is real so effectively and have us literally imprisoned for speaking anything other than the way history went down?
It's the same group. It's the accountants. Remember that the driving force on this planet is money. And when any group has mastery over money, control over money, and can use it any way it wants to, they can rewrite everything, and they will do it in such a palatable way that people accept it as truth, even though it's the antithesis of truth. And they always are trying to style people into a certain direction to make them more compliant, more amenable to the restrictions. Oh, it's for your own good. We want you to be safe. And that mentality has driven what's happened in the last probably 4 or 5 decades. If you look back at everything, all of the restrictions, all of the regulations based to, supposedly, well, we want to protect the environment and we want to help you this, we want to secure, it's all nonsense. It's all about overarching control and ripping off people with taxes and regulation fees and all the rest of it. It's a crock of baloney. But the people go, oh, okay, yeah, sure, you want, because they say it nicely. And they really are good at wrapping up the worst garbage and making it look like a beautiful souffle. They have that down to a science. And they pay people, okay, enormous money to give them statistics, so they know exactly what the people are going to do. They have actuaries that can tell you to the person how many people will resist and this and that, and they apply all of that with all of the psychology that they have milked themselves, and they basically can give you a blueprint of every place, every country, down to the last guy. Now, there's a few of us who slip through the cracks, but for the most part, it fits everybody. And people like us, we have a difficult time sometimes getting through, because it drives you crazy when you know what's going on and you're trying to point out, look, there's a bus gonna come, huh? They don't want to hear it. And when I was in high school, I got a really, I guess I would say, reputation for always stirring the pot. And I'd say, oh, geez, don't let her get started, because somebody would say something which I knew was complete baloney. And I'd say, I cannot be quiet. And so my teacher would say, go ahead, put your 2 cents in. And I'd say what I had to say. And they'd be like this, like a frenzy. They wanted to rip me to shreds, right? But interestingly enough, as time went by and we got out of school, went to college, married, had families, eventually you regroup at a reunion, you see people. And it was interesting to see the number of my former classmates who used to get really upset with me for my radical views to say to me, how did you know? I was amazed that I saw this or I heard that, and I realized, God, someone in high school said that, and I thought they were crazy. I said, well, I was tuned into a different frequency, I guess, but I'm glad that you woke up, because, we don't have a lot of awake people in this country. We have a lot of people believing the lie, and the truth gets kicked to the curb. Anybody that speaks the truth is a wacko. We're crazy, and yet here we are.
It must be very satisfying today to have lived an entire lifetime, and today to have us want to hear your story, your wisdom, your what you've traveled, because you've had to endure the wrath and the ridicule and the tar and feathering, and yet you've thrived and survived. But now I have a question that I want everyone to know. How did you two meet?
It's a good story.
I know. I mean, I already sense. So I want to know, and I would like people to understand how two people of such integrity and such morals and such character
Well, thank you
for that.
have come together to bring us this wealth of knowledge and this direction that we're going to get into more in the next series of conversations. But I'm all ears.
We were meant to meet. We came here to meet, but Margie can get into that.
I'll tell you briefly. Right. I was actually working as an agent for Lancôme of Paris at the time, because I had to close my business and I needed to support my last employees until I could close shop. Through my work there, I encountered a woman who told me I should take a course in Reiki. And I thought, okay, she said, I know you're a healer. I can tell by the way you are and with people. So I did. I took Reiki. I went to the first course, and the Reiki master said to me, you've been here before. And I said, no, I haven't. He said, I mean, on the planet as a master, because you're doing things that I can't do. And I'm telling you right now, there's something about you that's different. And he said, I'm glad that you're here and whatever. So I took the first course and I took the second course about 6 months later. And I was working for Lancome, and then I was also working.
How do you spell that? I can't hear the word.
Lancome, Lancome of Paris, okay?
Oh, that's so funny. I have a story about that. I'll tell you
Oh.
later.
So I was working for them, and I was also working at the clinic in Marblehead, Massachusetts on Thursday evenings, where we had a lot of volunteers come who were students, and we were teaching them how to do Reiki properly. So we'd usually have, 3, 4, 5, 6 people work on one client at a time, so that everybody would learn the techniques, and it was sort of a hands-on workshop. Well, I was supposed to do both sessions, one at 7 and one at 8, but I had to work late. So I didn't get there until almost 8 o'clock, I guess it was. And I walked into the vestibule, and it was summertime, and it was very hot and humid. And it was nice and cool in there. I opened the door, and I walked in, and I saw somebody coming this way. It was Jack. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and our eyes met, literally, like in one of those movies. And there was an energy that passed between us. And I thought, I know him, but I never met him. And I think that he was thinking the same thing at the same time. And then I realized that I had left the door open and I didn't want to waste the air conditioning. So I turned around and closed the door to the vestibule. I walked into the office and to the back, put my purse away. And John, our trainer master, said, I have a favor to ask you. I said, okay. He said, you're the most experienced practitioner I have here tonight. And he said, we're shorthanded because people are on vacation. So would you mind taking this gentleman over there by yourself? And I can bring the students here. And I said, oh, no problem. So I walked into the room in which Jack was waiting for me to come in. And I had heard him speak a couple of words, and I knew he was from Boston or Massachusetts somewhere. But I walked into the door, and as soon as I crossed the threshold, I got a vision of craggy mountains and deserts and cactus and yucca plants. And I thought, what am I getting this for? You know, so I walked in, I introduced myself, and he introduces himself, and we get to talking a little bit. I explain what I'm going to do and so forth. And he tells me that he's from Boston originally, but he's been living in Nevada. And he came back to Boston temporarily to help his father, who had had major heart surgery. So he was there while he was recovering. I said, oh, okay. So I gave him a Reiki treatment. And when it was over, he sat up and he said, wow. I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel great. I said, good. He said, I think you healed me. And I said, well, that was the point, wasn't it? And he said, no, I mean, really, I think you healed my back. And I said, good. So he said, maybe I'll come again sometime. And I said, sure, it'd be nice to see you again. And, you know, kind of, and I knew something had happened. I just knew it. It was like something clicked. So the next week I wasn't there. I think I was out sick, and Jack was there, and he said he was disappointed that he didn't see me. And the following week I was there, and he came. Several weeks went by, and finally he was supposed to go back to Nevada to do something. And one of the gals that was working with us asked him if he was going to drive or fly. And he said, oh, I'm going to drive. And she said, oh, how are you going to go out? He said, oh, probably Route 70. And I said, oh, that's a nice drive. He said, have you been out west? And I said, oh, yeah, many times. He said, where? I said, well, I've been Colorado, Arizona, California. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, in fact, I have a boy in school in Arizona. And he said, what? And I said, yeah. And he said, where? Like he was challenging me. And I said, Arizona State University, you might have heard of it. And he went, you have a boy in college? And I said, yes. And so his friend Helen, who had talked him into coming to Reiki in the first place, said, is he your oldest? I said, no, he's the third of 4. And she said, oh my God. She said, how old are you? And Jack said, shut up, Helen, don't ask how old she is. Well, it turns out he thought I was a lot younger than I looked. And he was afraid. He wanted to ask me out, but he was afraid to. He thought I was young and I'd have kids and it would be, you know, messy and tangled. So
I didn't want that.
no, he was like protecting himself. But anyway, next day I was at work for Lancome, and I said to one of my friends there, I was working on her head, she had a migraine. She said, what's going on with you? You're like distracted. I said, I have a feeling I'm going to have a message on my answering machine when I get home tonight. She said, why? And I told her about this guy, you know. So I get home that night, and sure enough, there was a message from him asking if we could go out to dinner and talk. And I said I would meet him in Brookline, and I did, and that was our first date. And that date lasted until 4:30 in the morning, sitting on a park bench, the last part of it talking.
In Cleveland
In
Circle.
Cleveland.
Somehow that does not surprise me, that it
And
was one of those
It was one of
long.
absolutely, and we've been together pretty much ever since. It just,
So what year was that?
that was 1991.
Oh, how lovely. I love those stories, and you're both dynamite. And when you get two very intelligent people and aligned in their own integrity and authentic, and you get them together, wow.
You know, it's a funny thing you should say that. One of Jack's dearest friends, the first time he met me, we went to their house for dinner. Remember Joe?
Yeah.
And we were talking and having a wonderful evening. And Joe took us aside. He said, "You guys are fantastic together." And we said, "Thank you." He said, "I'm not kidding." He said, "There's something about your energy together." He said, "You guys could start your own religion." And I said, "Oh my God." But he was trying to convey that there was something dynamic happening here. And we thought, oh, that's nice. Little did we know that we were both going to get dragged into this stuff, because both of us were trying to pursue life that was not always political and governmental, and having to constantly push back the tide. Because when I got into trying to change the tide, when I lived in Tewksbury, when my kids were small, I got involved in politics, not to run, but to stop the nonsense. Because my dad used to take me to town meetings at the time I was 10 years old, so I would know and understand what was going on. And because of that, I never lost my interest, my focus. And later on, when I got disgusted with what was going on in town, we got together with a group of people and we called ourselves the Taxpayers Association. And we turned the town over with the things that we did. And that was a blast. We had such a good time. And we held people to their oaths. And boy, they didn't like us too much. But we got a lot of bad people out of office and a lot of good people in. And that was another opportunity for me to go public.
That's fantastic. Well, I wanted to set the groundwork, and you've given us a very beautiful personal and then very old, thousands of years old historical line all the way up through the wars, and I think we're now ready to, in our next interview or next conversation, to talk about the next step and the next phase of this conversation. So I want to thank you for this incredible opportunity to learn and to share with others just who's before us, who you are, and why this is so important, and the work that you're bringing forward, and the wealth of information that we have to learn from you. And so hang on, folks. We have a lot left to experience.
Yes, we do. And today is Constitution Day.
Yes.
Just to let you know, today is the anniversary of the signing of the Constitution for the United States of America, September 17th.
So it's a good day.
It's a good day.
Auspicious day to begin our series.
Yes, yes.
Yes. And I'd like to say before we end, Margy and I are presenting a seminar here in Cherokee Village, Arkansas, where we live, on October 2nd and 3rd, okay, which is coming up in just a few weeks. We've done probably 50 or 60 seminars all over the country in the past, but we stopped that in 2012 because the people weren't really getting it. I mean, people were getting it from us, but they weren't really getting the big picture. And they didn't get the Patriot Act, and they didn't get the NDAA Act, and we tried to awaken the country to that. The country didn't care, so we retired. And the reason we came out of retirement is because of the unconstitutional actions that this communist government all throughout America, governments, I should say, federal, state, and local, are imposing upon the people. They're imposing communist policies upon the people. So the people have to wake up to this, and they have to fight it. Now, over the years, we know people have won thousands of cases against government, both in and out of court. And this seminar is going to be a teaching seminar for anyone who's interested. So if you are interested, our email is takebackOurRights@yahoo.com.
Take back our rights at yahoo.com.
Right, takebackOurRights@yahoo.com. And our phone number is 207-404-9093. And if people are interested in coming, we're looking for sincerely dedicated, committed, patriotic people who want to restore justice and constitutional governance back to this nation. And that's the focus of the seminar. And we've got the methods to do it. We've won thousands and thousands of times against governments. So these methods are effective and they work. And if you're interested, let us know.
Very good. And I will post those links and that information at the bottom of this posting that will go on both Odyssey and YouTube.
Excellent.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure,
speaking with
Kathleen.
you. I hope we didn't shock you too much, but we do speak the truth.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm with you on that, and I thank you for that. Nothing
you.
shy of that. And I look forward to our next.
As do we. Thank
As do
you.
we.
Have a great weekend. Be well. Say goodbye to Dugan for us.
I
Yes,
will.
tell them it was a pleasure to have met him.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
And the pooches too.